While the Raptors had a thrilling victory in Game 1 of the regular season, some fans are concerned about Fred VanVleet playing too many minutes to get the win against the Cleveland Cavaliers. So we're going to discuss if Fred VanVleet is going to have too much of a load on him this season and if we should be concerned about injuries going forward into the year. Additionally, Masai Ujiri is looking like a draft genius once again, and we have players all across the league speaking out about the Toronto Raptors defense. So a bunch of stuff to dive into. Without further ado, let's jump straight into it. Hello everybody, Ben Rogers here, the Raptors side, just breaking down the latest Toronto Raptors news. And if you guys want to stay up to date with everything surrounding the Toronto Raptors, subscribe to the Raptors Digest. And before we jump into anything, I do want to address, because it was brought up in the comment section so many times in the last video, and I've been bringing it up in all of our last 3-4 videos. I've been talking about it, but Ryker is alive. He's all good. There's no beef. He's just taking a break. I'm not sure when he's going to come back. He was supposed to come back in June, and then the preseason, then the regular season, but he's just a busy dude, man. So comments, chill out. Ryker's alive. Don't be stressed. And I'm saying at the start of the video, I've addressed it multiple times over the summer and stuff. I don't respond to every comment, but I just wanted to get that out of the way at the start of this video. And if people keep commenting, if people are concerned, right, point them to this video. Ryker's all good. Don't stress it. Mans is all right. But let's dive into the Raptors news. Let's talk about the Raptors, because we got some interesting stuff to discuss. And the first thing we're talking about is Fred VanVleet's minutes still an issue this season. Now, Fred VanVleet is obviously a key piece for this Raptors squad. He's going to be playing a bunch of minutes for this team regardless, right? We know that he's going to be a key piece. I'm not talking about we should bench Fred or anything like that. But a major issue for this Raptors team last season was Fred VanVleet's health, specifically in the second half of the season, because this man was overworked for the first 2/3 of the season, especially where Pascal was out. OG Anunoby was coming in and out of the lineup due to injury. We had a bunch of guys out in health and safety protocols for a long while, and Fred VanVleet just had too much of a load. Now, it led to an all-star appearance, but it also led to him being a shell of himself in the late half of the last quarter of the regular season, and specifically in the playoffs, where a lot of people really bagged on his performance, and he literally played till the wheels fell off. He played until he got injured and couldn't play anymore in that playoff series against the Philadelphia 76ers. So it's a testament to Fred VanVleet's toughness, but we need the Toronto Raptors to not play Fred VanVleet, overwork this man again this season, because in Game 1 of this year, he looked a lot quicker, he looked a lot smoother, moving like he did at the start of last season, playing elite defense, and, but in this game, played 39 minutes. Now, just for reference, that's the 4th most out of any player across the league in their opening night performance. In the first 2 nights, I think the Clippers and the Bucks still have their first games to go, but out of the 27 other teams in the league, Fred VanVleet played the 4th most out of any of those guys. And last season, according to ESPN, because I've seen different numbers going around, I'm just using what ESPN said. If you take out players that that played less than 4 or 5 games last season, a couple guys during the health and safety protocols time racked up the minutes. But Fred VanVleet, essentially, him and Siakam are 1 and 2 in terms of minutes played last year. Siakam at both of them at 37.9 minutes per game. So even though Siakam, he came into the season later as he had shoulder surgery last summer, so he had a shortened season in his own right, but Fred VanVleet really had a load on himself, and I discussed the injuries already, but Nick Nurse came into this year and essentially said that Fred VanVleet, he's a guy that we need to dial back his minutes. Now, we didn't have a few key bench pieces in Otto Porter Jr., Chris Boucher, Malachi Flynn didn't play, but Delano Banton had a lot of expectations due to his strong performance in preseason, so, he only got 7 minutes in that game last night. So is there cause for concern? Does Nick Nurse, because we know what Nick Nurse does. If he doesn't trust the bench player that's behind his starting guys, he's going to do what he did last year and run Siakam, Fred VanVleet, Scotty Barnes, all the guys that he trusts, OG Anunoby into the ground. And OG Anunoby's a guy that had injury concerns himself last year, but I'm not as stressed about it this season. Now, if the Raptors have injuries to their bench, especially a guy like Malachi Flynn being out for a long chunk of time, Otto Porter Jr., Chris Boucher, right? If Otto and Chris can come in, then Scotty Barnes can roll down to that point guard position at times. Siakam, right? I don't think we're going to see Fred VanVleet playing too many minutes night in, night out. Now, last night is not a good indication that Siakam only played 34 minutes, but OG had 38, Gary Trent had 37, and this was an intense game against the Cleveland Cavaliers. The Raptors were down for a large chunk of this game, so I get why Nick Nurse played it, but he can't make it a habit. I think when the sports scientists get in his area and stuff, he's going to have to play more guys on the bench. Even if it means a couple more losses this season, we want a healthy Fred VanVleet come playoff time. So that's going to be essential for him coming to the squad. And that's a key thing that we got to look out for Fred going into the late half of the season. But I'm worried about Delano Banton's jump shot. When teams went to his zone, he just struggled on that front, and they didn't do much in preseason, but last night they really helped. They didn't switch to his zone, and he didn't look as effective scoring. It's going to be interesting. The jury's still out on what Delano's happening, but we did bring back Malachi Flynn's option, so I'm not stressing. And if there's one positive in terms of Fred VanVleet's load coming into the season, it's Fred VanVleet didn't have to take that many shots last night. Took 9 shots, was very efficient, wasn't just driving the lanes, hucking up his shots, doing a lot of ISO plays, which we know are fatigue a player out more often, which leads to more potential for injury, right? He's sort of he almost looked like the 5th option out there when he was playing with the starting group in terms of scoring. Obviously, he has the ball in his hands, and he really focused on the defensive end. So maybe that's a positive. The same way LeBron James gets his rest mid-game, right? He sort of just starts walking up the court. He's less involved in certain plays. Maybe Nick Nurse goes that route, but he's talked about how valuable Fred VanVleet is, especially on the defensive end, and we discussed it in the post-game last night. Fred VanVleet is lethal. A lethal stealer, getting blocks last night and stuff. He stays in front of defenders, whether it be, Donovan Mitchell. Last night, it was, he might be switch on to Karras, Darius Garland before he ended up getting injured. Right, it's Fred VanVleet's a valuable asset, but just don't play him 39 minutes tonight. Don't have him and Siakam lead the league in minutes. Once again, Nick Nurse. So that's all I'm asking. That's all I'm begging. But the next thing we're talking about in this video is Christian Koloko looking like a steal for the Toronto Raptors. Now, we looked at him in preseason. We said physical tools, all there. Shot blocking, all there. Athleticism, length, potential, all there. But we questioned whether or not the touch was NBA ready. Looking at his highlights for Arizona back in college, he was all right at finishing around the rim. Obviously more of a defensive player and all that sort of stuff. But I just wanted to give some props to Christian Koloko out here because he came in against Jared Allen and Evan Mobley, 2 very long physical centers. Right, they can get their games going, drive the lane. I guess Evan Mobley isn't crazy physical, but long has that. It's tough to score on an Evan Mobley down there to paint, and especially Jared Allen. And Christian Koloko had absolutely no fear. The stats aren't going to hype him up too much. He was 1 of 4 from the field, 3 points, 6 rebounds, 1 block. But his demeanor, the way he just tried to dunk on players every single time he had the basketball. I believe all 4 of his shots, at least 3 of his shots were dunks. And they were contested dunks in traffic. Right, he's not going like the first month we had Bismack Biyombo, right? Light up to the rim and stuff. He's trying to yam it on top of people, yam it on some of the best shot blockers in the NBA. So that mentality alone, paired with the growth of his touch around the game, right? Sometimes players, and he did look a little bit shook early, like his first few minutes into action and stuff, but usually rookies, they can be a little bit tentative when they're out there. And the fact that Koloko's coming in with that mindset of, I'm going to dunk on some of the best shot blockers in the NBA, gets me excited as a Raptors fan, gets me excited about his development. So I wanted to show some love to Koloko, brought it up a little bit in the post-game live stream last night. But the next thing we're talking about is Cavs players speaking out on the Toronto Raptors defense. Now, there was a lot of discussion about not only referees, but on both sides of the court. I was watching the game with a bunch of Raptors fans. We thought the refs were more in the Cavs. I guess that's how it goes with any fan base, especially in an aggressive game. But Cavs fans were especially disgruntled with how the refereeing was called. They were saying the Raptors are a bunch of dirty players out here hacking every single possession. But the Cavs players specifically had more respect in terms of what the Raptors were doing out there on the defensive end. And this is brought up from Donovan Mitchell saying they're not the typical defensive principle. That's not the typical defensive principle, but that's how they do it. They have size, they have length, they switch, they drop, they're in blitz, they're boxing one, and you never know what's coming with this Toronto Raptors team. And then also went on to say that the randomness of their defense, they're very good at it. Nick Nurse, he's very good at all that sort of stuff. He's always been like that. I heard this since the G League days. So Nick Nurse getting a shout out there with the random defense, and then Jared Allen went on to say that they're a physical team. Every time you go into the paint, you know you're going to get hit. Every time you know things aren't going to be easy. You have to go in there with the mindset that it's going to be a rough game. It's going to be a lot of hands in the lane, hands everywhere, and you got to be ready for it. So Nice comments there from the Cleveland Cavaliers players. They know they're getting a bloodbath when they play the Raptors, and it's exactly how we have to play, given the fact, with the exception of Christian Koloko, we're still pretty undersized this season. So we had Fred VanVleet out there blocking Jared Allen. We had all hands on deck on defense last night. So it's a nice testament to the Raptors defense, because it's not as high as we expected, especially at the start of last year. It came on as the season went along, but the Raptors hang their hat on the defensive end ever since Nick Nurse. Even the late years with Dwayne Casey, we want to be a strong defensive team. So Kawhi Leonard, the Raptors, Dwayne Casey always preached the defense. We weren't the most elite defensive team with Lowry and DeMar backcourt, but ever since we got Kawhi, Nick Nurse came into town, we've been really pushing that end of the defensive end of the court. So Raptors got to keep that identity, and it's nice that we were able to execute it on game 1 of the regular season. And we also got a shout out for our defense from another player across the NBA, as star point guard Tyrese Halliburton ended up shouting out the Raptors on the defensive end once again. And this was kind of a subtle drop. It wasn't a direct statement on the Raptors game or anything like that, but he came out and said that this year he expects to face more switching defenses. His ability to counter that is perhaps most important in the big picture, about Halliburton adapting as the first option burden, yada yada yada. But he said, everybody wants to be the Toronto Raptors right now, and I'm prepared for that. It's basically indicating that everyone's trying to be switchable, trying to be mobile, trying to blitz teams like crazy. And the fact that we're the poster child for those unorthodox switching defenses, it's nice to see. It's nice to see that we're getting love, and we're the team that's recognized as the elite switching defense that no one wants to face up against. So shout out to Tyrese Halliburton, giving a shout out to the Raptors on that front there. But let me know what you guys think about the Raptors opening night of the season, and what's your expectations going into our game against Brooklyn tomorrow. In the comment section below, you're the best to make this far. Check out the Instagram, the TikTok, the Twitter, all that cool stuff. Anyways, I'm signing out. Cheers.